This is
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod,
RedPubPod.
a podcast from Redhawk Publications.
RedPubPod.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the next edition of RedPubPod, your friendly literary press podcast brought to you by Redhawk Publications, an initiative of Catawba Valley Community College in darling, charming Hickory, North Carolina. Thank you for being with us today and listening, and I'm very honored to say we've got, again, a wonderful author that we're looking forward to interviewing, John Rhea, author of Lifer. But just before we start getting into Mr. Rhea, I do want to present to everyone our guest podcast host of the day, which happens to be the illustrious and poetic Tim Peeler. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Good. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to the different podcast hosts that we have that kind of step in for us. It's been fun, and it brings a little new light to some of the questions that we ask. And it does help, of course, that Tim is one of our editors for hire, if you will. So, again, we're grateful to have him here. But for the man of the hour, we've got our author, John Rhea. If you have not gotten a copy of Lifer, his debut novel, I highly encourage you to just run right now, put this on pause, and go over to redhawkpublications.com and get yourself a copy of Lifer, because it's one of those debut novels that come out just once in a blue moon. You get a first-time author writing something and totally hitting it out of the park. We're going to talk a little bit first about that novel, but before that, if you don't mind, John, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know a lot of folks might be interested in your background. People don't write just coming out of the womb, but you might have, but you didn't. You had a career first. So kind of share with our listeners what your background is.
Well, I'm originally from South Carolina, and I was a criminal defense attorney for a real job. And I retired to Asheville, wanting ostensibly to try to write. I had written a novel when I was young, right out of undergrad, which was your typically poor sophomoric youthful novel. But I knew I wanted to try again. And then after having the work ethic and self-discipline that was instilled in me as a lawyer, I was able to buckle down in retirement and try and write again. And that's how Lifer came to be.
The protagonist in your story is a lawyer.
Correct, yes. Lifer is the story of a former criminal defense attorney like myself, but not me. He might even be more flawed than me, actually, if that's possible. He finds himself, unfortunately, in prison for murder. He blames this predicament on his older, charismatic first cousin. The novel takes place in present tense within the confines of a prison, a maximum security prison in South Carolina. But a big part of the book is flashbacks of the protagonist, Jack Merritt's life, and how he ended up in this particular situation. So it goes back and forth from past to present tense.
And I will say that that's kind of a unique convention to use, to be able to go back and forth well. And you did.
Well, thank you.
And for anybody who likes those procedural prison-type books or even TV series, you'll enjoy this book, because I actually was one of those weird people that liked Oz, which was on HBO. Man, the way they kind of portray prison, you're right up there in your description of your prison yard in
Thank you.
in Lifer. So it's brutally honest in its portrayal of what could happen in a maximum security prison. And then, of course, when you handle the eloquent background of the past, your family, your loved ones, it's so eloquent, it's so poetic, it's beautiful. And then when you snap back to that reality of the prison scenes, Boy, there's a juxtaposition there.
I didn't want it to be too dark for too long stretches of time. That requires a lot, I think, of a reader. Some of the great Russian novels, I could never write that wonderfully, but it's a lot of darkness for a lot of pages. So I wanted to intersperse the darkness with some light, with a love story and some of the family saga, to balance it out a little bit, and I hope that worked. The quick cuts, from past to present, and shorter scenes, that just seems to come naturally to me. I think when I was growing up, I read Joan Didion, kind of the queen of the quick cuts.
And the short chapters.
Yeah, and short chapters. And also writers like my hero, Thomas McGuane, writes like that a lot. So it came naturally to me to do it that way. I don't know whether it was by design or just that's the way I write.
Did you have a background, other than what you started to write when you were an undergrad, to accomplish this magnitude at this quality of level of writing? Did you take any writing classes? Did you belong to a writer's circle?
I did, absolutely. I took a class at the Great Smokies Writing Program out of University of North Carolina, Asheville, which I can't say enough good things about. And I had, as a teacher, I had the great Tommy Hayes, who's good friends with Tim, of course.
Wow.
Tommy's just a wonderful person and an excellent novelist, obviously. But he was very kind and generous with me as his student, and encouraged me to continue. I made him promise that he wasn't just being nice. Sometimes teachers are very nice to students, but he said, no, you need to see this through. And he also put me in touch. He said, you're going to need a good editor. And he put me in touch with Tom Rash, also Tim's friend, who is just a marvelous editor, and we've become great friends. In the acknowledgments at the end of the novel, I thank Tom, and I say something to the effect that the best advice I can give any aspiring writer is to find an editor who's 3 times smarter than you, and that's true. Writing is difficult. In some ways, there is a great creative spark that all writers have at some point in time to get things going. But a big part of writing is just hard work. It's rewriting, and redrafting, editing, as Tim well knows, I'm sure. And so to have Tom to guide me and help me in that way was just phenomenal and very instrumental in Lifer seeing the light of day.
Looking at Ron Rash's quote on the cover where he talks about how sharp the dialogue is, this is what I had to say about it. It has a strong narrative voice that holds it all together, obviously, very strong. But one of the things that drew me to the novel is the quality of the dialogue and how it serves to advance the plot. And that's like really high-level novel writing, especially for a first novel. Would you talk about that, how you managed to come up with this incredible dialogue?
Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate those kind words, especially coming from someone as experienced and talented as you. That means the world to me. Well, this was my first novel, but you have to understand, I've been trying to be a writer and wanting desperately to be a writer since I was 15 years old. I wrote a unpublished novel when I was 24. That was, as I said, your typical sophomore effort. I had started another novel before I abandoned it and started Lifer. So I've been writing for a while. In terms of the dialogue of this book, when I was a lawyer and working long hours, I knew that I didn't have time to write a novel, but I would hear these wonderful bits of dialogue. And so I did write them in a journal. And I've been waiting with some of them, not all, but with some of them, to find the right vessel in which to use that dialogue. And Lifer became that vessel for a lot of it. But I think dialogue is one of the things that, for whatever reason, comes naturally to me. I don't know that descriptive writing sometimes is a challenge for me. But dialogue, I hear it musically in some ways, and I love writers who are good with dialogue. I think I've just been reading a lot of writers who I consider to be great with dialogue. Ron Rash is great with dialogue. Richard Price is great with dialogue. Barry Hannah was marvelous with dialogue. Southern dialogue. It's got to be. Sometimes it's got to be really sharp and succinct and spot on. So, it's just practicing that. But when I say a musical quality to it, I just have to say it over and over in my head in kind of a sing-song quality to make sure it sounds right, but also it ends at the perfect time. And Walker Percy was great with that
yes.
as well, like in The Moviegoer and Lancelot. So, I've always been attracted to writers who enjoy writing dialogue. That's a long answer to a short question.
No.
I'm sorry.
It's just rare that you see that in a first novel where it's used so perfectly to advance the plot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have good dialogue, but to have good dialogue that moves it along is remarkable.
And let's
Thank
not
you.
forget, the characters are so
Yes.
darn diverse.
You'd think he had known criminals.
Well, again, the trial attorney background with handling capital offenses. I know you've met a lot of different people that probably had a lot of good dialogue and quotes that you could write down in a book. But you also have, your college educated people that you write about and write their dialogue for. You've got Emily, the protagonist's love interest. You've got your cousin. You've got family. You've got African American, Hispanic, rednecks, if you will. I mean, all those folks that populate a prison. You've captured all of those idiosyncratic ways that people talk, the vernacular. It's impressive what you did to create all these different types of characters. How did you handle that?
Very slowly and carefully.
Yeah, it's hard to keep them apart.
Yeah, it is.
They have to be consistent.
Absolutely. And, in the prison, I had so many characters because I had to give the flavor of, that it's this bustling place of human warehousing, essentially, but also trying to make them, each one distinct. I gave them nicknames as opposed to, John Smith, Al Henderson, which aren't that memorable.
No, you got rid of the government names.
Yeah. Giving them nicknames seemed very natural because that's what men do sometimes, and so with a nickname, if you could make it the right name, have it the right unique to fit the person, that would make that particular character memorable to the reader pretty quickly, which is what I wanted. And that way I could start in with a dialogue and in the reader's mind hopefully say, well, that's something that particular character would say. With other dialogue, for example, the love story, when the protagonist has a memory of falling in love with his wife, which is bittersweet because, he really loved her and now he's away from her and might never see her again. So I wanted to capture that type of longing and also the wonderful memory in his mind of falling in love with her. So I had the love story set in Charleston, which is obviously a very romantic city. And it's a city I know well because I clerked down there one summer for a law firm. So I know that locale well. But trying to capture her dialogue, Emily's dialogue was exact opposite of some of the prison dialogue. You're right. So I would say that in my experience, for me, writing about love is the hardest thing. I don't know, Tim,
Very difficult.
You've done that much more than I have, much more accomplished than I have. I just found it, and Tom Rash had said, Writing about love was the hardest thing. The prison scenes came fairly quickly. I mean, I edited them a lot, but in comparison to the love scenes, they were very, very difficult to get right. I probably rewrote the Charleston scene more than any other in the book, trying to get it just right, because love is hard to write about.
That's a lovely setup, how you met and the dates you went on. I mean, all of that, it's very memorable, and I pictured it in my mind as I read it. So well done for the rewrites.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I have a question, just bringing this back a little bit to that writing community, and there's a reason why we like to harp on that here at Redhawk Publications, is because we have a community of writers that are actually coming to our campus. It seems like every semester. We're creating a writing community through classes that we offer at night. And sure enough, the same people that started it in the fall took it again in the spring, and they're taking it again in the summer. Again, it's become a writer's community. And you mentioned that you used the UNCA's Greater Smoky Writers as yours. Does that work the same way? And I'm asking because if I have some referrals for people who want to join that, is that something that you can attend all the time, or is that kind of more a one-off? Or do people participate with the Great Smoky Writers series?
No, you can take, and in fact, I took a class before I took Tommy Hayes' class.
Okay.
And I was working on a totally different project then. The novel that I had started before Lifer, that I wisely, I think, abandoned.
Okay.
But yes, as far as I know,
There's
it's
lots-
just a matter of signing up.
Right.
Tim, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Signing up in time to, you know.
to catch their classes.
Yes,
And
yes.
they're online, if I'm not mistaken, because I think I know someone who takes it.
Yeah, they just hired Luke Hankins to run that program,
Yeah.
which was a really good hire. I mean, he will do a great job for them.
Great. And again, just sharing that with our listeners and maybe those aspiring writers out there, there are so many opportunities to get involved in a writing community, even if it's virtual, it all helps. And the very fact that through this writing program, you met Tommy Hayes, who referred you to Tom Rash, your editor, and Tom knew of us, Redhawk, and you end up getting your book published. So we really can't emphasize enough the importance of writers' communities. It's good for your craft, it's good for the discipline and accountability, and it's also solid in terms of networking.
Absolutely. And I've just found a very welcoming, warm, kind, encouraging community of writers, both in Asheville and in Hickory. I mean, the fact that, you know, Tom and Ron Rash and Tim Peeler, people of that caliber would, you know, take the time out for previously unpublished author working on his debut novel and take that much time and help me like that is just, I'm honored and humbled by it. But I think that's, in talking with other writers or aspiring writers, they have similar stories of how helpful everyone is. And I think that's important to have a great writers community, to encourage people that otherwise might not get involved. Because at the end of the day, writing is a solitary experience, you know, as Tim well knows. But it's also good, you know, when you come out of your study or wherever you write, to be able to have other people to bounce things off of that you know and trust, and who can be objective with you about your writing.
How long were you working on this novel?
I would say it took me a little over 2 years to write the first draft, which was, to my mind, I thought it was fairly polished, because I write slowly. Some people write a rough draft very quickly. I go through it slowly. I don't like to start a chapter till I think I'm finished with another, if that makes any sense. And that's probably the slowest way to write a novel. But I would say a little over 2 years, and then with Tom, and the editing process took probably around 6 months, because Tom was involved in doing some other things, other projects. So, I would make corrections and then wait till he could get to them.
So you walked around all that time with the story in your head, and people thought you were a zombie?
Yeah.
Because that's the way it is when you're in the middle of a story.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's something, as a writer, it's pretty hard to explain to somebody. If you're in the middle of something, you're walking around thinking about it
Well,
in your day-to-day life.
I think there were parts of the day when my wife just kind of gave up on trying to have an intelligent conversation with me, because she would be talking about something, and my mind would wander as to, what do I need to do with chapter 7 there? And she would, eventually she realized, let's wait till he unplugs from what he's working on, and then we'll have a conversation. So yeah, you're in your own zone, but I think it's important to stay in that zone if you can.
You have to.
Without getting kicked out of the house, mind you. Because, I'm so afraid. Do you find this, Tim, that if you step away, that you might lose something to the ether?
It's not the same person coming back to it.
Yes, exactly. It'll somehow alter.
It's the whole, you can't step in the same river.
That same
It's a different
water.
river every time you step in.
Absolutely. The water's moving, and
Yeah.
you better capture it when you can, or you'll
Yeah.
lose it forever. Downstream, it'll be swept away. So, yeah, there is a little bit of that feeling. Writing is hard enough without trying to make it harder by getting away from it, taking away from your level of concentration. I think you have to be consistent with that. But do you put a word count on a daily basis for yourself, the Hemingway method?
No. And I mostly write poetry, even though it ends up being like long narrative things. I don't worry that much about how much gets done. I just want to make sure that something gets done every day or close to it.
I've heard from a range of a lazy female author, she knows who she is, who says, I am the world's most laziest author. I don't give myself deadlines or page numbers or X number of hours daily. At 3 a.m., my character wakes me up and I start writing. So she gets possessed. That's her motivator, but she admits that she's not that disciplined daily writer. She writes when she is called to write, and she's very accomplished. The other end, of course, you've met people, and the folks, it's like, I got to get my 10,000. I've got to get my a chapter a day. I write every day from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., and then I'm good. So it's a range. But everyone has their discipline model. What would you say yours was? Like, did you make yourself write Monday through Friday or 7 days a week? Or
Well, I have to treat it like a job, or else I'm afraid it just won't get done. I do think, being a lawyer helped in one regard, which was, the self-discipline required that I might not have otherwise had. So I have to show up for work every day and try to write. Now, some days go better than the other. But I'm like Tim, I couldn't do the Hemingway method of, I have to write X amount. I can't remember what it was, 350 polished, finished words per day or per sitting. I can't do that. That would be a recipe for misery for me. I do think it's possible to go to work and not have that many words to show for it. Mm-hmm. But you've gotten a lot accomplished because you've thought, very seriously and intensely about what you want to do with the scene, and also what you don't want to do with the scene. So you save yourself some time of going down a blind alley, and you might write a lot of words, but you'll have to tear it up at the end of the day or the next day. So I do think it's possible, don't you, Tim, to just by thinking about what you don't want to do, you're really accomplishing a lot, even though you might not have written much, if that makes any sense.
Right. And you just have to really take advantage of the times where everything's working and you know that it's good writing.
That's right.
And, that's when you have to, like if you would talk to Ron Rash right now, he's writing short stories. And he's really got the muse.
He's in the zone.
He is in the zone. And like one day Tom called him and he said, "You got 5 minutes."
Yeah, yeah. I've seen him when he's in that zone before.
Right.
Yeah, you just don't want to tinker with it.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with it.
No.
Whenever it,
Because the muse is not always in touch with you.
Yeah,
but
she's
when-
not just hanging out waiting for you.
Yeah, but when those lines of communication are open, you better be in a position to be receptive to it.
You know what? I am going to ask you to prepare, or if you wouldn't mind doing a reading for us, a select reading from
Okay.
the book. And while you do that, I want to apologize to our listening audience. Richard Eller is here too. And I know he's laughing. Well, Richard, I have a question for you because you too are quite the author yourself. Sorry, dear. Sorry, dear. But you write a lot as well. And I never asked you this question as someone who does write historical writing. What's your discipline? I see you write dutifully, but I'm just kind of curious. What's your theory on writing?
I'm not these guys. So I write, I'm like, if I can get 1,000 words a day, it can be great or it can be trash. But I gotta have something I'm going for, Okay. I agree with you, what John was saying about getting in the zone, because if you're in that zone, you don't want to let that tiger go.
Yep.
You gotta grab onto those ears and ride with it. I like to go back and read it as a bit of a different person to see if I really was in the zone or I wasn't.
That's true.
Yeah.
Whoa. I don't follow. What are you saying? What?
You look at it with fresh eyes.
Oh, yeah.
You come back to it
Yeah.
and go, that's stupid. I don't
Yeah.
why did I
yeah.
write that? That don't make any sense. And then I got to have, my wife is the first person that always reads this stuff, and I'll get her going down the road and say, hey, read this and see what you think. I think you do need somebody to bounce it off
First
of, be it a
reader.
writing community or,
Yeah.
somebody that you trust.
And we know that Ron's first reader is his brother, Tom.
Right.
Who was your first reader? Who did you bounce things off kind of fairly quickly? We know Richard had Claudia, Ron has Tom. Who did John have? Was it your wife May or?
Well, May is always one of my first readers.
Okay.
She's a voracious reader. I truly don't know anybody who reads more books on an annual basis than she does. Tom Rash, after he became my editor and friend, is a first reader. And I have two friends of mine who are lawyers, but also voracious readers of literary fiction, who have always been my first readers, even before Lifer.
Okay.
And one of the things about lifelong friendships, Tim, they'll be brutal with you. They'll tell you what they think. But writers need to hear that.
Yeah.
So I've got this little group that are my first readers.
Okay. And if you wouldn't mind, please regale us with a selection of your choice. This is again from Lifer, written by John Rhea, published by Redhawk Publications, and we do encourage you to go to our website, redhawkpublications.com, and get yourself a copy of John's book. We're going to have him sign a few too, so if you're hearing this and you're interested in the book, order it online. You'll get an autographed copy. Let's make sure we get you the autographed copies before you leave. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Patty. In the interest of time, I'll just read a little short section here that will give the readers maybe a flavor of the prison. I'll clean. This will be cleaned up. I promise.
Sanitized.
Yeah, sanitized version. Chapter 8. Today marks the second anniversary of my conviction. Both prisoners and guards alike are affected by current events. Several recent prison escapes in Ohio, Kentucky, and Texas have made the national news. When hearing of these, most of my fellow inmates have cheered maniacally like British soccer hooligans. Jailbreaks give them hope, however unrealistic, and hope is the most precious commodity in here. I've heard them talking about it nonstop, especially Panic. He relishes the thought of sticking it to the man, almost as much as he does the idea of his own freedom. When the inmates in Kentucky were captured days later, hiding in the woods only a few miles from their prison, Panic was distraught, angry, and incredulous. He kept saying, "They couldn't steal a getaway car? How hard is that? My ass would have been in Mexico by now." All of these escapes have been from older prisons with crumbling infrastructure. According to the news, the inmates in Ohio, who had some working knowledge of HVAC, discovered a compromised grate and were able to shimmy through the ventilation chases to the outside. Unfortunately, a new underground facility like Congaree presents unique challenges. But the guys in here are much more knowledgeable than me about construction matters, and I won't be surprised if one day somebody figures out a way to get up to ground level. So then what? Unless he has a catapult ready and waiting, he will still have to deal with the sharpshooters in the towers and somehow scale a 30-foot-high concrete wall topped with razor wire so sharp that it occasionally slices careless birds in two. If by chance an inmate should make it all the way to the yard, I doubt he'd fare any better than those poor birds. Regulation 206 states that inmates, while on the yard, must not communicate in any way whatsoever with the guards in the towers. It's commonly known as the distraction rule. Like many regulations, 206 has at times been bent, depending upon the personalities involved. On the yard, I've heard Master chatting with one of the sharpshooters nicknamed Blink. They have a mutual friend. They used to talk about NASCAR mostly. Then last week I overheard Blink tell Master they couldn't talk anymore. They're clamping down on us. Why's that? Not sure. Had a big meeting with the top brass and they laid down the law, Blink said, walking to the other side of the tower with an AR-15 resting atop his shoulder. The rifle cast a long shadow across the guard tower, making it look like there was a bayonet attached. Panic went over to Master and said, "What's the deal with your sweetheart?" "They say he's a crack shot. All that matters." "Well, why don't he join the army then?" Panic said. "Wanted to. Got a bad foot." "Sounds like an Earnhardt fan," Panic said. I can't help but wonder if the crackdown is a result of those jailbreaks getting a lot of press. It could have come down from on high at the Department of Corrections, or it simply could have been a matter of our warden seeing his fellow prison officials in Texas interviewed on NBC and realizing that an escape would signal the end of his political ambitions. Losing an inmate would be great ammunition for an opponent during a debate. Today on the yard, looking over the razor wire at the tall pines in the distance, I saw the two egrets circling. I've noticed them for the last few weeks. The birds seem to return to a location about a half-mile away. I estimate that's where it starts to get swampy in Congaree National Park, a 40-square-mile hardwood forest bordering the prison. It's very much like the woods I grew up playing in, and this wilderness has taken on a mythical quality for me. If I could just get there and make it to the river, it would be impossible for the dogs to track me over water. Maybe I could have someone, who, leave me a kayak and plenty of food and water, enough to survive for a couple of days. There's a scenario in my mind where all of the pieces fall into place. Before prison, I didn't know what true longing was. I thought I did, but it was just some romanticized nonsense. Longing, I now know, is not Jay Gatsby staring at the green light on Daisy's dock. Not by a long shot. That's desire, a completely different thing. Longing is being aware that what one desires is unobtainable.
Wow.
Wow.
It's not only well written, but you read really well, John.
Well, thank you, Patty. That's kind of a requirement of being a trial attorney. I'm a little rusty, but thank you so much. I'm just kidding. I know some orators who put me to shame, but I try to learn from a lot of great trial attorneys. There's a lot to learn about. I mean, oratory is, unfortunately, I don't know if you've kind of seen this, Tim, it's kind of a dying art. Not many cases get tried that much anymore. And, they used to have these beautiful old courtrooms that the acoustics were made, for oratory. And now the newer courtrooms are like boxes, the acoustics are terrible. So in a lot of ways, oratorical skills are on the way out, like a lot of things. It's a lost art.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for reading that section, and we encourage everyone out there to make sure you get a copy, because that's just a glimpse of hope denied for our protagonist. But at the same time, there's some really lovely, bittersweet parts of this book. Not the world's longest book. You guys got this. It's only coming in at about 212 pages. But that brings a question I have about the publishing process. I know this book came to us through Tom Rash. And what would you say publishing has been like for you? Because you were a partner in this, in us getting this out.
It has been a pleasure working with Redhawk.
Yeah, but just in terms of, we would give you galleys, and you would mark them up, and then we'd give you another galley, and then you'd mark it up, rinse and repeat. By the way, we don't mind that. That happens with novels. That's supposed to happen with novels, so it's good. Yeah. But were you aware that was the process?
Well, no, this was my first time, so I really didn't know what to expect. And I'm very glad that, well, at least I think this is the case, I'm very glad that Patty likes me on a personal level, because I think she found out pretty quickly that, and maybe this has to do with being a former lawyer, that I'm a little anal retentive, as well as with some seasoning of OCD in there as well, which is a dangerous combination. So I think there were days when I would be deliberating period versus semicolon, where you would have to say, John, you have to make a decision. So, Patty, I'm sorry to have put you and Richard and Robert and everyone at Redhawk through that. I think I can't help it, right?
Well, and it didn't even dawn on me. You're not our first attorney rodeo. I mean, our very first one was Austin Allred, author of The Legend of the Isle of Cats. And it was also our very first large novel.
It was.
And come to think of it, Tim, you helped edit that.
Oh, my.
And the reason I'm bringing that up is that was kind of the first time I learned about the process of editing a novel is far different, from poetry, which poetic license, we kind of give them free rein. But when it comes to a novel, I learned through Austin's book that it is going to be more like a tennis match. It goes back and forth, and we get there. Yes, eventually I had to tell Austin, put your pen down. Yes. Had to do the same to you, my friend, John.
Absolutely. Multiple times.
And we've got Jason Parker out there. He will be our third attorney. Right. And his is a memoir coming out soon. I've had to tell him, put that pen down. Actually, I think I had Tom Rash tell him. But the fact is, novels are different. Working with an attorney mentality is a little different too. I'm okay with it. attorney friendly over here.
I need to get you together with my former paralegal, who was like my sister, Beth. Shout out to Beth Branham, the most patient woman in the world, along with Patty Thompson and my bride. In fact, the last time I was in this room, I think was when I was doing the final corrections. And you gave me a red pen, and I came back here, and then I sheepishly handed it to you, thinking it might have looked a little too
red.
little too bloody.
A little too red.
But you accepted it, so thank you. Thank you for your patience, Patty.
And the other thing about attorneys, when they do give us notes or edits, you guys are meticulous in the way you hand them to us. So that I do respect. Not only you're writing in the margins, but you're redundant. You're putting it on a pad also. Love all of that. But that said, just a quick question. Any more books in you?
Well, I'm working on a new novel now. No offense, I don't want to talk too much about it. I don't know how you are, Tim. I'm always afraid to talk about something too much that I'll somehow spoil it. I'm about 4 chapters in. Totally different, not a prison novel. I mean, it is literary fiction, but it's nothing to do with life. Or I don't know where I'm going. I'm letting it happen organically. It could, any novel, I guess like a poem, is trying to take the Kon-Tiki across the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know when the first storm's coming and whether the vessel will survive it. I don't know, but that's part of the excitement of the journey. It's torturous, but simultaneously exhilarating also, right? When you say, Tim, I don't know.
One thing you're going to find out if you keep doing this over and over is that whenever you're going out to promote a book, you're already working on the new one every time.
Exactly, and that's
So
been
you
hard
have
for
to
me
kind of
to
balance those two things.
That has been somewhat difficult.
You will.
I'm living with these bookstore readings and signings. I'm living with Lifer. And don't get me wrong, I love Lifer. Please go purchase and read Lifer. But part of my mind is also on the new project, and that's tough to balance. Tim's shaking his head affirmatively.
Talk to Ron about it.
Yeah. Well, Ron is in a different stratosphere there, but I wish I could be as prolific as Ron. I write very slowly. I'm just trying to feel my way forward with this new one. There's a lot to write about with what's going on in the world, and I just don't know how that's going to filter into it.
Well, you're leaving us on a good note, and I want to thank you. We're going to start to wrap this up, but I do want to give a big shout out to our podcast sponsor. We are very fortunate to have Tasteful Beans, owned by poet Scott Owens in downtown Hickory. Not only are they the sponsors of RedPubPod, but they're cheerleaders and friends and collaborators. We call them family, frankly. Anytime you're in Hickory, please make sure you go down to Tasteful Beans and get yourself not just a cup of coffee, but get yourself something to eat. Their food's phenomenal, fresh and sourced locally. And, of course, they are the host of Poetry Hickory, which is the second Tuesday of every month, I believe. So check out Tasteful Beans on the internet. Make sure you check out Poetry Hickory. We do appreciate their sponsorship and belief in us. I think that's really it, guys. I mean, other than telling people to go to redhawkpublications.com and get the book. Make sure you visit us on Facebook or Instagram. We've got more opportunities and more events coming up that we always place. John, is there anything else you'd like to kind of share with us?
Well, I just want to thank you and Tim and Richard and everyone at Redhawk again for making my dream come true.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
Great experience from our side.
No joke.
Well,
yeah, when they
thank
come in like this, it's like it makes life easier. Lifer makes life easier.
Lifer makes, unless you're a lifer. Unless you're a lifer.
Yeah. Thank you, guys, everyone. One final last little thing. We're going to ask you to say the name of our podcast, RedPubPod. Can you say that?
RedPubPod.
And he did. How about you, Mr. Tim?
RedPubPod.
Richard?
RedPubPod.
Well, I will say that after having been a defense attorney, that should actually be a field sobriety test. It's very tricky,
Yeah,
very,
it
very
is.
tricky. An unfair, as all of them are, an unfair field sobriety test.
Well, we may have a few more listeners now because it seems like the last few authors that have come in here are well prepped. They already know how to say it, which is totally awesome. That makes me happy. That's it. Thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to our next edition of RedPubPod. And if you don't mind, Mr. Eller, take us away.
This is
RedPubPod.
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 a podcast. RedPubPod from Redhawk Publications. RedPubPod.
That should actually be a field sobriety test. It's very tricky, very, very tricky.